For over 15 years, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show, presented by Play Now, the official sports betting partner of the Winnipeg Jets, starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. And for all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Along with Dave Minuk, along with Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mindell, here to discuss the Winnipeg Jets and their winning ways. Oh, hang on. Breaking news from Canada Life Center. Ezzy still has not had a Devil's goal to celebrate. That is the latest update this morning.
I deserve that.
Ezzy
I deserve that.
Still not celebrated anything, but that's okay. We're glad to have you here. You know, you had about 12 hours or so to drown your sorrow. So I hope you're feeling better and you're back in the proper mindset to handle this morning's broadcast.
Yeah, 12 hours and 12 drinks later, guys. I think I'm still feeling it, but I'm not as young as I used to be, right? But it was not a great night for the Devils. But I thought that there was like this very business-like approach by the Jets yesterday. Like they obviously scored the early goals, right, guys, and kind of put the Devils out of the game early. But there was just this confidence in this Jets team like that. They really humbled the Devils last night. And granted, the Devils have not been playing great hockey as of late, and they're kind of just clinging on to third in the Metro, right, because they're kind of locked in there.
Yeah.
But they're limping into the playoffs, guys, without Dougie Hamilton, without Jack Hughes. I just thought that the Jets just you even know that Luke Hughes didn't play last night. Yeah, exactly. No, but I mean, those are big losses, right, for the Devils.
Huge losses.
And I'm not, I'm a glass half full type of guy, and I'm pretty optimistic. But I'm not that optimistic, unfortunately, that the Devils are going to be going far this year with two of their best players out. But I just thought, guys, that the Jets just executed their game plan perfectly last night. Like it was like, get the early lead, get another few goals, go into shutdown mode. Like how many good chances did the Devils have to score yesterday? Like there weren't many. And there were obviously, Dave, a lot of similarities between last night's game and the 4-0 win over Dallas.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it, Ezzy. You're right. The Jets were connected and committed to playing a certain style of game. And we saw that. We heard about it in the morning skate, and we saw it because, as Drew and I talked about on last night's postgame show. I mean, this is a team that you can't take your foot off the gas. The teams behind you, the Dallas Stars, the Colorado Avalanche, they ain't stopping. The St. Louis Blues, the Minnesota Wild to a certain degree, but they're getting healthy. So you've got all these teams that are still in the mix, and as Kelly Moore said, 5 of the top 13 teams right now in the NHL are from the Central. And, this is a team that, again, there's no coast to their game. We saw last year how you go into the postseason doesn't necessarily indicate how you're going to do, right? Jets won 8 straight games, and then they got pummeled by the Colorado Avalanche and lost in 5. So that's important to be playing a certain style, but it's, again, I almost think it's better for the Winnipeg Jets to have the Dallas Stars breathing down their neck, just 6 points back, 4 points before last night's win, and then it doesn't allow them to allow any sort of malaise to enter their game. They can't afford to, because if you take a night off, guess what? Dallas is right behind you, and that's going to make. Let me tell you, everyone better be at Boston Pizza on that Thursday. Is it a Thursday night, Drew? Because
Thursday, April the 10th, Dave. That's right.
It's going to be a hell of a good game. It could be a clinching game, as Drew mentioned on last night's broadcast, as when the Jets take the Dallas Stars, and we'll be at Boston Pizza Taylor. But I'm just saying that.
I'm just also like laughing to myself because Drew's literally told us when the Boston Pizza show is like 15 times.
Yeah.
And like, it's good that Drew keeps us organized because Drew's like, April 10th. Remember when I told you April 10th, like 20 times ago?
And mentioned it on the broadcast 14 times. But
yeah,
again, it's a team that I think is going to benefit from Dallas doing what they're doing and from Colorado doing what they're doing. And we know this is a team that was humbled last year.
Iron sharpens iron. That's sort of philosophy, right, Dave?
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is a team that learned from their mistake from last year, and there's no coast. They're just playing. And even like we heard about it from, I can't remember if it was Luke Shen or Kyle Connor, who both spoke it yesterday morning, but both guys, I think, said something to the effect of, listen, like, there are still improvements to our game that we need to be made. This team was, as they slipped, they're no longer the number one power play unit. Vegas Golden Knights took that over. So there's some slippage in their game, we know, and there are things that they want to work on. So to me, it was a really good start to the final 10 games of the regular season.
And guys, just wanted to quickly throw in, Drew, like, the power play obviously has been struggling since the Four Nations break, right? But the 5-on-5 play has made up for that, right? And obviously, when you have the type of goaltending Connor Hellebuyck is giving you last night, like, you just got the feeling, guys, in last night's game, like the Devils weren't scoring on Hellebuyck. At least I was like, I've seen this story way too many times. Like, the Devils don't have it tonight. Helly is not letting any goals in tonight, right?
And he was his big and boring self, and when when he can describe his game as big and boring, how difficult it is for the opponents to succeed. And that's certainly, you're right. I would agree with you there, Ezzy, that had the Devil, it's sort of bizarre to say it because, it's 4-0 and, after 40 minutes, the game is over. Who's going to win the game. Yeah. But I think everybody in the arena, it was like, would have been really, disappointed if Hellebuyck didn't get a shutout, which just tells you how dialed in and how locked in he is and how the Jets are, in that the expectation over the final 20 minutes of relatively meaningless hockey was that the opponent would not get a goal. That just tells you just sort of what the mindset of everybody around this organization right now is.
Absolutely. And, Dave mentioned it earlier, but, Dallas creeps to within 4 points of the Jets. And now you're kind of looking in the rearview mirror. You're thinking, like, weren't we just 12 points up on you? Like, weren't we just 10 points up on you? And Dallas keeps winning. Colorado keeps winning. Obviously, we're going to have Jeremy Rutherford on because we just have to talk about the St. Louis Blues. They just keep winning. Like, and obviously they could be an opponent for the Jets in the first round. But I just thought that, there was a lot of similarities between the way the Jets have played the last couple of games against the Caps and the Devils to the team that we saw when they were at their peak earlier in the season, right? Like, there's just contributions from a variety of sources. It's a full team effort. Obviously, Alex Iafallo has just fit in seamlessly on that top line, getting a couple of goals. And then David Gustafsson, as Dave mentioned, right? Like, 9 games, he's a healthy scratch, and he scores a goal in his first game back. Like, everything just seemed to be going well for the Jets. And I just thought it was a really impressive victory from start to finish. Like, the Jets were in control of that game. There was no doubt about it at all.
Well, you mentioned Alex Iafallo, and you mentioned his seamless fit so far, being bumped up to the top line with Gabe Vilardi out of the lineup. And that's really where I want to spend a fair bit of time over the next, 15, 20 minutes or so until Kevin Sawyer joins us at the bottom of the hour, is the revamped forward lines for the Winnipeg Jets. Because it's now been, I believe, 2 games since Vilardi's injury. The Tuesday game against Washington, which was one of the better games this season in terms of compete level and stylistically familiar to a playoff game. And then last night, which was obviously an easier victory, but again, the Jets game looked similar to what you would expect it to look like. So, are you surprised at sort of how quickly these lines seem to be connecting with one another? I mean, Gabe Vilardi is not a bum. He's not a depth player in your lineup. He's a high-quality player that the Jets have relied upon, yet they haven't skipped a beat with him out of the lineup so far.
Well, okay, I'll just say, to me at least, the biggest thing is if you look at these, there's so much familiarity. This team has played together. You look at Lowry and Appleton. Well, Lowry's played with Ehlers. So that is kind of the benefit to Scott Arniel having, obviously guys go down with injury, but you have that muscle memory. You're like, okay, Adam Lowry and Nikolai Ehlers, they played together. Okay, these guys can continue to play together. And to me, that's we talk about it often as a trio. And in certain instances, guys are a trio and it's a fixed, group. Connor and Scheifele and Vilardi, and we knew Wheeler before that. But, in other instances, oftentimes it's thought of as a duo. Who's a good duo who play well together? And I think, like, you look at Lowry and Appleton, even Lowry and Ehlers, you've got Nemestikov and Perfetti. Nino Niederreiter's that Swiss Army knife, intentional use of that, especially with all his Swiss friends in the building. Yeah. And so you've got these guys who are all connected. And then, you talk about the agents of chaos on that fourth line. Well, those guys are all guys who are complementary players to each other. They all play somewhat similar games. They're big, heavy, committed to defense. So that to me is like, you have that opportunity. I mean, this has been the strength of this Jets team now, right, boys, for a while, the idea of depth. And depth being able to step in when person X goes out. Jets lose Rasmus Kupari to it. Again, we don't know because Scott O'Neill wasn't specific, but right now he's had a minor setback. That's what we know. And he's day to day. Okay. Well, as he just said, David Gustafsson comes in and doesn't miss a beat. Looks perfect. I know he didn't play a lot, and he told Kevin that he's got some rust on the old Gus bus but the fact of the matter is he gets a goal in his first game back after 9. He's feeling good. So to me, I just think that there are, and Alex Iafallo, he's jumped up on the first line before. So there's no surprising these guys. These guys have all benefited from having to play with each other throughout the course of the season or last season or the season before. And I think you're seeing that benefit.
This is no slander to Rasmus Kupari, who I think has had a very solid year for the Winnipeg Jets. But personally, I think I prefer the fourth line as more built as a physical line than a speed line. And Kupari's a speed guy. I like the fourth line better with Barron up the middle and with Tanev and with, before, of course, it was Iafallo before the Velarde injury. And I spoke about, I thought their physicality really made a difference and impacted the game. I think Gustafsson is more also sort of bigger bodied guy. And so I like the line with Barron up the middle more than I do with Kupari up the middle. I know that, obviously it was only that one game that he came back and then got injured in, but I don't think that, as a personal preference, I like that fourth line as currently constructed with Barron up the middle more than I do with Kupari up the middle, Ezzy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think the numbers back that up. And I think, what you saw last night was David Gustafsson comes in and there's not much of a drop off, right? Obviously, Gustafsson, like you said, Drew, not as fast of a player as Rasmus Kupari. And, just going back to your original question, looking at the lines in a whole, and Dave's right. I mean, you think of Barron's Gabe Velarde's absence, and you think, okay, well, now that's a significant piece of the lineup, which it is. But Alex Iafallo has proven time after time that he can step in, whether that's, on a Lowry, Ehlers, Iafallo line that we saw earlier this season, which was successful, or if that's moving up to the top line, or just making a switch up to the third line with Lowry and Appleton or Lowry and Niederreiter, whatever it might be. And, I look at these lines and I think obviously they've been successful. The Jets have won their last 2 games, but I still wonder kind of going forward, guys, and obviously Velarde's week to week, and, everyone's hopeful that he's going to be back for game 1 of the playoffs. But I still think that, when you look at these lines, I still think is Perfetti not an option with Ehlers and Lowry just to give it a little bit more offense, right? I still don't think that these lines are going to be as set in stone as the lines that we've seen all year long, right? Like Scheifele, Connor, Velarde, and Nemesnikov, Perfetti, Ehlers, and Lowry, Appleton, Niederreiter. You know what I mean? I wouldn't say that these lines are already going to be kind of set like that, just because I think it's still too much of a small sample size. But I do think that, it, like Dave said, because you've got so much familiarity with these lines, the Nemesnikov and Perfetti have been a pair for, going on a couple of years now. Lowry, Appleton, obviously, Connor, Scheifele, and then obviously, Barron and Tanev. Tanev's back with the Jets, so that's a new combination, but obviously he's a veteran, and you know what you're going to get in a night in, night out basis from Brandon Tanev, right? So I think it has been impressive, but it just speaks to the depth of this team, right, guys? Velarde's out, and that's a huge loss, especially on the power play. We've talked about it all year long. He's been kind of that secret weapon for the Jets on the power play, but there's enough depth. I kept thinking last night, I'm like, I think you have to sign Alex Iafallo in the offseason, right? He's just been so good. Obviously, they have to work out the numbers and everything like that and figure out, is it a 2-year deal or a 3-year deal? But I just think Iafallo, and he said that he wants to be here, right, guys? So Iafallo has stepped up in a big way for the Jets, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's no question about that, and he's proving the versatility that he brings to the table, is hugely important. The Jets have, of course, a number of those guys who can move up and down the lineup, which makes them so difficult to play against. Come in night out, where a guy like Velarde can leave the lineup, and to your point, nobody really skips a beat. My question would be, or my concern would be, and we don't know when Gabe Velarde is set to come back. I know there was some misconception that he was out for the season. I think it was a poor choice of word by somebody, and there was the impression that he might have been gone for the year. That's certainly not the case. We know that based on the reports from the Jets that he's week to week. To me, I do think you need him back at some point in the playoffs, maybe not game one, round one, but at some point in the playoffs, you need that high skill that he brings back in your lineup to progress and get as far as you think you can. I think that his absence, while right now isn't being felt, I think it would be felt in round 2 or round 3 if the Jets were to get that far. I think you need Gabe Vilardi back as quickly as possible, obviously, but I do think that it does limit the Jets' ceiling with him being out of the lineup if it is longer than just, maybe a few games into the playoffs, Dave.
Yeah, I don't think there's, again, Alex Iafallo is a nice complementary piece. He's been, like I said, he's able to do some similar things. We talked about it on last night's show, Drew. I'm not going to say he's Gabriel Vilardi light, but at the same time, we got to remember Gabriel Vilardi has 27 goals and 34 assists this season. So, and I think Alex Iafallo's, 13 and 12 maybe, or 13 and 13. He's having a good year, but he's not Gabriel Vilardi. So to me, and obviously a lot of that is usage. I'll be clear. I mean, Gabriel Vilardi's played first line minutes and Alex Iafallo's played on the fourth line. But at the same time, yeah, you're right, Drew. I mean, at the end of the day, if the Jets want to be a team that is going to be able to go as deep as they can, which we all know is what their goal is, you need a guy like Gabriel Vilardi to be back. And the good news is, though, and the important thing is, you can't account for injuries in a season or in the playoffs. And we've seen what's happened to the Jets in the past when injuries to major pieces, Mark Scheifele was suspended, but Josh Morrissey's gotten injured.
Well,
Nikolai Ehlers
he was also injured in the Calgary play.
That's right. That's right. In the bubble, in that was that game 1 against when Kachuk stepped on him or whatever.
The crushing injury.
It's a good memory, Dave. I think it was the first game.
Yeah. So you've got Scheifele injured. Obviously, Josh Morrissey when he was injured. You've had Nikolai Ehlers injured. So my point is that you had major injuries and you can't account for them. So I think there's a benefit to having. Sadly, I mean, obviously you don't want guys to get injured, but there is going to be a benefit to the Jets overall to have the ability to say, okay, if we lose a guy in the top, in our top line, we can mix and match some pieces to be able to offset it to a degree. But ultimately, yeah, like I said, you want to be able to, like it's anything, as you're going to know that you're always going to do best if your best players are on the ice, and this is a very good player in Gabriel Vilardi. So you hope that he's ready to go, maybe in the last game 81, game 82, get him in for some, so there's a little less rust on his legs. But ultimately, by the way, this show this segment should be sponsored by an auto body shop, because I've mentioned rust. Yeah, there's a lot of rust so far, especially with, the end of winter and all the salt coming off the road. So maybe we should find an auto body company that wants to sponsor that segment. But I just think that if you have Vilardi, the nice thing for the Jets is that it's giving other guys opportunity to kind of learn. And if you need to, you can kind of fit them in. But ultimately, Drew, at the end of the day, if your goal is 16 wins in the playoffs, a guy like Gabriel Vilardi will be a key piece for the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, there's no question. I think everybody would agree with that consensus. But it is, I do find it interesting just, how dialed in and how connected they are. And we've talked about this all year long, that when, that they don't skip a beat, that, Scott Arniel can switch the lines up, and the lines when they put back together, or when they, the new look lines can perform at a high level. I agree with what you said, though, Ezzy, a couple minutes ago, that these lines are not baked in. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I do think that, and this is an advantage to the Jets, that I think depending on the game circumstance, particularly come playoff time, depending on the game circumstance, you're going to see these lines get shuffled around. Jets are trailing by a goal. They need some offense. I think you're going to see Cole Perfetti, back with Nikolai Ehlers, something along those lines. The Jets, holding on to a lead, they need to do some shutdown. I think you're going to see Lowry, Niederreiter, and Appleton back together again. I think right now they are what they are, and Scott Arniel is sort of spreading the wealth and spreading the responsibilities up and down all four lines, and that's a beautiful position to be in when you're top in the Western Conference with 50 wins and I think it's 104 points at this point in the season. That's an advantageous position for the Jets to be in. But I do agree that ultimately, come playoff time, I think you're going to see these lines get tweaked to fit whatever situation the Jets are currently playing in.
Right. And like you said earlier, Drew, that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's actually it's actually a luxury for Scott O'Neill to have these games, right? Like, I think if Gabe Vilardi, for example, was injured with 1 or 2 games left in the season, then there would be a little bit more pressure on O'Neill to really find the lines that you want to have clicking going into the playoffs, right? And right now, I think, Nikolai Ehlers is your secret weapon, right? Because whatever line Nikolai Ehlers is on is going to be a possession positive line, right? Like, I'm sure you guys talked about it last night, right? Like, the Ehlers line, their numbers were really good. I think the high danger chances were 4 versus 1, if I'm not mistaken, for that line. And I was keeping kind of track. They were going up against the Mercer Halla Brat line, which is a very good line, right? Like, I watched the Devils, and that's a good line. And Ehlers and Lowry, they just work together. And I think we talked about it earlier in the season, right, guys? When the Lowry-Ehlers Iafallo line was putting up those impressive both advanced stats and producing, we kind of said, like, this is not a line that you necessarily expected to click together. But these are all players that are smart enough and they've been around the league enough that they can figure out how to feed off of each other, right? Like, and I think that's a credit to Adam Lowry yesterday. Like, just watching that game, I mean, there was a lot at stake, like we talked about, right? Like, this could have easily been, one of the 15 wins in the beginning part of the season when the Jets went on that 15-1 run. But I mean, you had Dallas, they're breathing down your necks. Like, let's be honest here, guys. Yeah. Like, the Jets are now in a position where they obviously have clinched a playoff spot and they're comfortably in a playoff spot, but they want to finish first in the President's Trophy race. Like, these guys will tell you this, Dave, right? Like, everyone kind of minimizes the importance of winning the President's Trophy, but the reality is you assure home ice advantage. We know that, the Jets get a huge boost from the whiteout crowd, right? So I thought last night was really impressive coming off of, one of the biggest games of the year. And
there was no emotional letdown, is what you're saying.
No, and it was right from puck drop, right? Like, the early goal by Iafallo kind of set the tone. And the Devils, I just thought, were on their heels the whole game, and they were just chasing the game, and they never really established anything against the Jets. The Jets just went into that prevent defense shutdown mode, and they obviously got a couple more goals.
The Devils couldn't match the Jets' intensity or work ethic, to be perfectly honest. The Jets, to your point, and Dave and I talked about this on last night's post-game show, the Jets just, took it to the New Jersey Devils, and the Devils wilted. It was going to take a pretty Herculean effort by the Devils in the first place.
Great word, Drew.
Thank you. We know the litany of injuries, and then it's announced right before the game that Luke Hughes is out of the lineup. And frankly, the Devils, to your point, as you said, they're locked into that third spot in the Metro, and they basically are. And it's not a crucial game for them. But you want to see, what's the heart? What's the compete level? They just didn't match the Jets' compete level. They didn't match the Jets' effort. Understandably, to some extent, I don't think Shelton Keefe is going to really understand it as much, or he's going to take that much solace out of it. But the Jets just said, okay, we're going to step on you quickly and early and often. And that's exactly what happened, Dave. The Jets just said, no, this isn't a game where we want to toy around with you. We're not going to dominate the first 15 minutes and then let a cheap goal in or let an unexpected goal in like happened against Buffalo last Sunday so many times. We're just going to end this game nice and quickly, and then we're going to be able to dictate the style of game for the remainder of the, as it happened, 58 minutes after the Jets scored twice in the first 2 minutes of the game.
Well, and again, that I'll make sure I get this one in, because from our friend Amanda Stein, when she was talking to Brendan Dillon, this is his comment, former Jets defenseman, now Devils defenseman. Just get out of the first 5 at least 0-0. I think you have at least a chance. Now, being on the opposing side, I was telling the guys, we got to weather the storm early, no pun intended. Well, there was a couple of storms last night, of course, the snowstorm and then the whiteout storm on the ice. So, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is the fact that there's not a lot at stake, other than as he says, Dallas is now 4 points behind you in the race. And I like the fact that after one of the biggest kind of knocks on the Jets has been that they had that huge game on the Friday night against Dallas Stars. They beat the Stars, play a completely fantastic game. And then there's a bit of a drop off, not a bit. There was a big drop off from their play after that game. And you're like, okay, well, that's not great, but you can understand it to a certain degree. What I liked was the fact that after an emotional game against the Washington Capitals, a game where you gave up the goal to Alex Ovechkin to tie the game, and then you win it in overtime in that fashion. Nikolai Ehlers, what a goal. Colby Spence is in the chat, and if you didn't see Colby's photos of it, go check our Legal Curve Instagram because they're incredible. But the fact of the matter is that you have that win. You beat the Washington Capitals twice this season, of course, both times in overtime. So that's a feather in your cap. You get that much closer to them in the President's Cup races, as he mentions. And then, of course, now you're ahead of them. But the biggest question mark would be, here's a Devils team that's middling based on all their injuries. They're not really in any desperation mode, as we've talked about. The Islanders were, I think, 9 points behind them. So they know that they're pretty much locked into that third spot. And yet the Jets treated it as if it was a match against an opponent that they needed to come out and play an effective step on their neck right away sort of game, which is exactly what they did. And so, again, it wasn't a particularly high event game throughout the course of it overall, but it was, again, it was another really good effort from this Jets team to show that, hey, okay, we're taking this seriously. And again, the words are easy to say when they're doing media availabilities, right, boys? But they actually back those words up with actions, and that's the impressive part. And we'll see again against a desperate Vancouver team on Sunday. I don't want to look too far ahead. We're still talking about lines and all that other stuff. But yeah, I like the fact that this Jets team played to their brand. And that's one of the things that they needed to keep doing. And they didn't change based on their opponent, which in my mind is quite significant. Drew, you're muted.
Drew's never sounded better.
Yeah.
Sorry, I hit the mute button on the mic.
This is the problem when you're doing the old chiclets holding onto your mic thing, Drew.
It's true. I know. I'm always out of sorts when I'm not in the home studio. But
Drew, are you in Santorini right now?
Yes, that's right. That's exactly it. No, I'm in parts unknown. Nobody needs to know where I am. Obviously, I'm on vacation with the family, but nobody.
Looks beautiful in the background there.
Thank you. Yes, the security level is very high, so we're going to keep that quiet as to where I actually am. I'll tell you what. I see that our good friend Kevin Sawyer has just joined us backstage. So why don't we take our first commercial break this morning, and when we come back, Kevin is going to join us for more Jets talk. It's Saturday morning. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. It's presented by Play Now. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and Kevin Sawyer up next. Don't go anywhere.
We want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling sites instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now you might have questions like,
do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Centre. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime, visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Centre. Holt Dental, the new official dentist of Illegal Curve, has a philosophy rooted in two unyielding principles: genuinely caring about patients and providing outstanding service. Being a patient of Holt Dental means more than just checkups and treatments. It's taking the time to listen and talk to each patient so they can achieve the best long-term health, functionality, and aesthetics for their teeth, mouth, and gums. Conveniently located at Grant Park Festival on Taylor Avenue, Holt Dental is dentistry of the highest quality in a comfortable and relaxed environment. For more information, visit holtdental.ca. Oh, and there's plenty of free parking at the front door, too. Celebrating its 40th year as Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best and most affordable live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For more information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
At Boston Pizza, a fast lunch doesn't have to mean fast food. Now you can get a $15 lunch served in just 20 minutes, including your choice of a main, side, and drink. That's right, lunch for $15 at your local Boston Pizza.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Half past the bottom of the hour. Both things are the same. I realize that. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, and Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning, talking about the Winnipeg Jets. And no better person to welcome to the program than our good friend, Jets on TSN analyst Kevin Sawyer, joins us this morning for more Jets talk. Kevin, good morning. How are things?
Things are really good. How could they not be here in Winnipeg, right, fellas? Like,
absolutely.
Team just keeps winning.
The team just does keep winning. We were talking about that sort of, in the first 30 minutes of this morning's broadcast, how they just went out there last night with the right mindset that, early on, the Devils announced right before the game, Luke Hughes not going to play, another blow to a fragile team. And the Jets just go out there and they take control of the game within the first 2 minutes. And then frankly, sort of coast and are able to play their game for the next 58 minutes. To me, they just continue to be dialed in. There's been no setback, no drop off. And to me, that it was part of that is so impressive given the high emotions from Tuesday's game against the Washington Capitals.
That's harder to do than most people understand. And to me, it's another box checked for the Jets where, you can say, hey, good teams get ready to play for every single game of the year. But anybody that's ever played in the league can tell you it's impossible to get yourself at 100% every game. It's a long year and there's ups and downs. No team's ever won 82 games. And so there's a natural built-in drop-off. After you play the best team in the league, the Washington Capitals, that was a bar brawl against the Capitals, man. That game was high level in every single way. So then you wonder yourself, hey, it's happened in the past. I mean, the Jets just lost to the Buffalo Sabres. Said on the broadcast, they lost to some teams like, Anaheim, Columbus, Detroit, Nashville. And this one would have been maybe regarded as a bit of a natural exhale or a letdown. It wasn't. And that was just another kind of box checked in my mind about, hey, we're going to continue to look inward here and get ourselves ready regardless of our opponent. There's a lot of emotional swings, right, in the playoffs where, you can be up by a few goals. Next thing you know, you can be in a tie game. So you have to make sure that you keep it steady. Jets that might be one of their biggest strengths all year long, about kind of resetting after a win or resetting after a loss. In this case, they reset after a big win against a really good team.
Kevin, we have to talk to you about Alex Iafallo, and I feel like you call him Al Iafallo on the broadcast, and I since you've been calling him that, I feel like Al Iafallo just sounds better. So I'm going to go with Al Iafallo, Kev, because I think you started that. I'm not sure if a lot of the guys on the team call him Al, but Al Iafallo just rings really good for me. But I mean, 2 goals yesterday, obviously replacing Gabe Vilardi on the top line. Like, I guess we shouldn't be surprised, right? Like, we were talking about this earlier. Obviously, you look at his stats, and obviously they're not going to be as impressive as Gabe Vilardi's, but his goals and assists don't do him justice, the role that he plays on this team. And I just thought, again, yesterday, just another example of how important he is to this team, whatever line he happens to be on.
Now, I just want to clarify, are we talking about Albert here?
Okay. No, Alvin. We're talking about Alvin Iafallo here.
I call him Albert on the plane. You know what? He is so valuable. He and Vladimir Namestnikov, to me, would be 2 of the most, if not the most versatile, useful players in the National Hockey League. Remember, and I said this on the broadcast last night, Al grew up kind of in the NHL playing alongside of Andrzej Kopitar, 2-time Selke Trophy winner. And that doesn't happen, first of all, for free. And you don't come out of that without learning a lot of things about how to play winning hockey, right? Like Kopitar is a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, and Al has been the hound dog before on the top line. He's played in the bottom 6 of that team as well. And they knew what now the Jets know, and he's a valuable commodity. And to me, somebody that you have to have on your roster if you want to win, because things are never going to go as planned. They never are. So setbacks come. And in this case, it's Vilardi being out. And I want to make sure I'm clear here. That's not a good thing. Of course it's not. But when setbacks happen, all successful people, to me, high achieving people or teams take setbacks and they say, how can we allow this to make us better? And that's what we're looking at here. So now the Jets haven't missed a beat. As a matter of fact, I thought that they were playing just okay for a little while there since the Four Nations break. And maybe it would be fair to argue that a setback by losing one of your best forwards was enough to kind of interject some juice to shuffle every single line. And that's important too, because, I go back to our third line, best third line in the National Hockey League when we're healthy. That's a great thing, but it's not if you can't deviate from that if needed. And so now that was almost starting to become an issue in my mind where it's like, well, where do they go next? And now we see where you go next. And that's bringing a fourth liner in Albert to the first line. And arguably they've gotten a little bit better as of lately. They're never going to be as good as they can be without Velarde, but what a weapon. He's been great.
Kevin, we'll move from the forwards to the defense. And if you talk about a guy who seems to make everybody around him at least another foot taller, it's Luke Schenn. And, we heard from him yesterday morning before after morning skate, and he just has this quiet confidence about him. But from your perspective, what is he bringing to this team and his experience, his Stanley Cups, his pedigree? Because it was interesting, he was asked in the media availability about, a winning mentality. He said, look, we're just focused on the next game. We're not focused on what we're going to do in the Stanley Cup. But I just thought his answers just give that fact that he's been there, he's done that, which nobody else on this team has done. And it just seems so important to have on this group to add, to kind of try and get them to that next step.
Yeah. So last year, the Winnipeg Jets added Tyler Toffoli. I liked the ad because of the fact that he can score. He's more of a veteran player, but had a Stanley Cup to his resume. He was the first-year guy in LA when they won that Stanley Cup. Now you've added a different type of Stanley Cup champion, a two-time Stanley Cup champion in Luke Schenn, who played kind of a complementary role in Tampa. He wasn't a driver in those Stanley Cups, but he was a big part. And I've talked to different guys where he was a big part of the stability and the identity of that team. And he's a guy that can play and breed confidence in his lineup because he's going to be reliable, but he's going to catch the attention of the other team. You guys see it would become the fourth all-time most hits in the National Hockey League history. Don't forget, they've added another Stanley Cup champion in Davis Payne. And that was in 2014. They won that Stanley Cup with the LA Kings. So I'm getting to know Luke really well, and he is exactly beyond what I thought that the Jets were getting, and that is a really mature person, man, confident in himself, but not arrogant in any way. And that just is adding to already a really good culture. But he's got that low brow. And, you look at the Washington game, what Tom Wilson didn't want to engage in a fight with him. Maybe Tom would say this isn't a fair trade-off, and maybe Tom would be right. But at the same time, everybody in Washington, just like the bench for the Jets, knew Tom Wilson's out here running around and being a force. So was Luke in his own way. And that's important to have. You have to have that pushback. He provides Stanley Cup pedigree, and he provides that presence of stability, which are just another little cog in the chain of what you need to have a chance to win.
Well, he laid that hit yesterday. I can't remember if it was on Eric Hall or Jesper Bratt, and nobody on the Devils, and you pointed it out on the broadcast, Kevin, nobody even looked to respond to him because they're like, well, first of all, it was a clean hit. So, it's nice to see that there's not immediately a fight after every clean hit. But at the same time, it would be like, well, nobody wants to take on that animal because he's just going to lay waste to you immediately. It makes everybody feel, as you've said before, or the cliche goes, makes everybody feel a few inches taller when he's on the ice.
Just to add to that, so I've been on teams where, especially as a younger player, like I was the guy that was going to do the fist fighting. I was going to be that guy, but I've been on teams where it's just me and the other team has three of me. And you can say, yeah, we're team tough.
And Kevin, you took them all down.
Yeah, well, you're halfway. I went down with or without them. But if you don't have an answer, the other team knows it, and so does your team. You do. You can play team tough, pack mentality, and that's required. Jets have been really good at that, but you still have to have some heavy artillery, because everybody knows. And Luke Shen, along with Adam Lowry, they give this team just that. It's important.
Kevin Sawyer, Jets on TSN analyst, our guest this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey show presented by Play Now. Big thanks to Play Now for their continued. You know, Kevin, we talked about Gabe Vilardi's absence, and the Jets haven't skipped a beat so far. How many rounds can the Jets go without him in the lineup contributing? So far, so good. We know this is very much next man up, but at the same time, he's a 60-point guy who's had a tremendous year for the Winnipeg Jets. Does it change their ceiling come playoff time if he's not back and able to be in the lineup within, let's say, a few games of round one or early round two?
Well, they better believe they can go 4 and win 16 games. I'll tell you that right now. And I believe, I think they believe that, because you can't focus on what you don't have. But here's the thing for me is, okay, we've answered a question here in my mind, because the Jets have played the Washington Capitals. Like, can that first line still be effective? We don't know. They've been the best line in the NHL, but it's because of that 3-piece puzzle. And so they've answered that question. Where do you go next? Injuries are a reality of the playoffs and Stanley Cup champions, but you can only withhold so much and withstand so much. So then the next question is, okay, what next? What if you lose another key player that is an offensive-minded guy that you need to produce? The answer to your question is they should be able to win a Stanley Cup as much today as they were able to last week. But that, let's be honest, can only go so far. So I don't know. I have no intel at all about whether Gabe is going to return or not, when he's going to return or not. I know it's week to week. You guys know that as well. But, I mean, every Stanley Cup champion will tell you that you need health and you need luck on top of being a team ready to win. So to answer, I don't know how to answer that question other than right now they better believe they can win a Stanley Cup without him. And they showed you now a few times how good they can be without him. But there is a limit to those injuries.
Is it easier to lose a key cog like a Gabe Vilardi later in the regular season versus, mid first round of the playoffs? Just in terms of the mindset, in terms of being able to adapt, is it easier to sort of recalibrate yourself later in the year and know you're not going to have them than it is have it happen mid round?
Every single team and coach will tell you that, there's a reason that a lot of teams have to lose the Stanley Cup to win it. And that's because you have to feel the emotions, and there's no way you could ever predict what's coming, right? The doubt, the excitement, all the things that come. My last year was Game 7 Stanley Cup final. We lost to the New Jersey Devils in 2003. I wasn't playing, I was injured, but I can tell you, just even from the peripheral, the emotions that are attached to that are something you cannot prepare for. You have to feel it. And on that note, I think it's so important, and good coaches, I think Scott O'Neill's done a nice job of this, where you want your team to feel as many things as many times as you can throughout the course of the rehearsal, the regular season. So things are going to happen in the playoffs, but this isn't always a bad thing when you have to deal with guys like this. Deal with some significant injuries. Neil Pionk's been out for some time now. Who's next? Where do we go? So to answer your question, it can be jarring, shocking, and it could breed a ton of insecurity if the first real adversity you feel when you're already in the fight. I like the way the Jets have dealt with some of these setbacks. This is a big one, and they're going to need them. That power play is going to need them. They haven't missed a step, but I mean, at the same time, this isn't round 3 of the Stanley Cup playoffs against the Dallas Stars or the Vegas Golden Knights, whoever it may be.
I have a Jets question, but you just mentioned when you played for the Ducks, the 2003 Stanley Cup final. That was the year where Stevens laid out Paul Kariya, and then he came back and scored the winning goal, right?
That was
2003, yeah.
2003. I'll tell you, being in the building, again, I was out with a concussion, and so I was sitting with some of the other fellas inside the stands. We weren't in the locker room when that happened. I've never witnessed such a swing of emotion in a building. It went dead quiet. It was devastating. And then to see Mike Babcock lose his composure the way he did, and we're like, it's over. I mean, nobody's saying that, but you're thinking that. Fast forward, whatever it was, 10 minutes, and Paulie comes back out during a commercial break, and the place started to shake. And we were in commercial break, and then he gets out on the ice and does some laps. You guys have probably seen it because he taps Mike Leclerc on the bench, and the place started shaking. It was so loud. Okay. And then during the game, he comes out in a shift. We were getting so emotional from that energy. It was crazy. I can't explain to you how it sounded and what it felt like when he put that thing in the top corner against Brodeur, guys. It was nuts. Yeah, I was there.
I had to ask you about that just because that's what, 22 years ago now. But I mean, that series was, both of those teams, your team and the Devils, and J.S. Jaguar was doing what he was doing. I had to ask you about that. But
listen,
sorry, go ahead.
Listen, let me share this with you because this applies. We were the 8th seed. I just saw Steve Thomas, we call him Stumpy, in Edmonton the other day. I hadn't seen him since that series ended, an old teammate of mine. We were the 8th seed going into the playoffs that year. We had no business, and nobody expected us to go deeper than just getting to the playoffs. We swept the Detroit Red Wings in the first round. We went through, I think we had the third longest game in the history of the playoffs. We beat Dallas in 5th overtime en route to the Stanley Cup final. We go to New Jersey, lose the first 2 games, come back to Anaheim, and we're getting ready for game 3. And 2 guys that wouldn't take charge of the room, Rob Niedermeyer, who's a really good friend of mine, and J.S. Jaguar. Jiggy was a guy we were super tight, laugh and joke. He was a part of the room, but he wouldn't be like, I'm going to sit down and talk. Those 2 guys had a closed door meeting, and it was closed door with the coaches, but they took charge. And I'll share the story with you. Rob Niedermeyer sat down, and just to hear him talk the way he did was already got everybody's attention because he would never otherwise do that. And he told us this story about 2 cups, no cups. That was his nickname back in Cranbrook, but with all of their friends. Because at that time, Scott had 2 cups, he had none. And he went through about how that made him feel and the burning desire to win after he saw his brother win and all the things that it took and he goes, I want my nickname to change. And I'll never forget how that impacted me personally. And the reason I tell you that story is because it requires not just your leaders to lead, it requires everybody to find a way to have a piece of a championship team. We ended up losing in game 7, but I feel like the Winnipeg Jets locker room now has those pieces where you go back 3-4 years, that was not going to happen. Now they have the sum of their parts could do that and have a talk like Rob Niedermeyer did with us. It meant a ton. It was chilling.
I love it. That's thanks for sharing that with us, because I think I speak for Dave and Drew, and we could talk about, that was such a great era of hockey, right? And that just brings back so many good memories of that series and the run that Jaguar went on. And obviously, Paul Kariya is one of the best players of all time. He was at his peak around there. But I wanted to just go back to the Jets and ask you about Logan Stanley, because Dave and Drew will back me up here. Like, I kind of got a few times came on the show and just kind of said, like, I'm just sick and tired of all the negativity swirling around Logan Stanley, because obviously, he's been criticized, at times on that third pair. But watching the game yesterday, it just seemed like you didn't hear his name a lot, but that's a good thing, as right? And he played a little bit more. I think I saw 18 minutes, playing a little bit more than he normally does. But, all the talk about Luke Shen moving up in Neil Pionk's spot, but also Logan Stanley coming back into the lineup. He just looks like he's playing with a lot more confidence than he was maybe even, a few weeks ago.
Agreed. You know what? I think that's fair. And the comment you made about maybe not hearing his name is a good thing, generally speaking. I agree. And that's because what they need from him is to be stable and just steady Eddie here. Like, move the puck, make the play in front of you. Eventually, and like, listen, honest to God, I don't go on social media in part because I don't want it to sway my opinion. So I don't really know, other than a little bit of rumblings around, oh boy, he's getting beat up or this, or that's fine. I know I get beat up too, and all that's part of it. But if I'm being fair and critical of Logan Stanley, and I have been, first of all, I know that he wants to improve. I think he has improved. There's been holes in his game for sure. But I give a lot of credit to Logan and the Winnipeg Jets, where they've given him a lot of runway to improve. Okay, you want him to be better? Got to give him a chance, right? Not going to get better without a chance. They've done that. And it hasn't been perfect hockey, but so he gets pulled out of the lineup, and I'm thinking that might be it otherwise, unless there's an injury. Well, there's an injury. Okay, Neil Pionk's out, and he's come back in, and I think he's shown a level of confidence, maybe learned from what he's been through. The only thing that I will say, and this is being critical, and it's not an old school mentality, but they need to notice him when we play the Washington Capitals and you have a lunatic, and I mean that in a positive way, with Tom Wilson, right? Because he's part of that Adam Lowry, Luke Schenn story. And I think he was, you noticed him. Could he have done more? Yeah. But could he have gone away? Yeah, he didn't. So I'm with you. I'm like, wow, he might be playing some of his most stable, reliable hockey all year long. So, and this is not an easy time to play this in this type of season, or this time of the season. So I think he's done a more than fine job.
Kevin, you're talking about guys who are stable and consistent, and no better answer than number 37 in net. What we're seeing from him this season is historic, and he set his own personal and the franchise record, of course, for shutouts in a season with 7 last night. He's got 44 in his career. He's 2 off of his career high of wins, which is 42. He's at 42. He's going to get to 44. And of course, he could match Martin Brodeur and Braden Holtby with 48. So we'll see if he gets to that. But from your perspective, one of the things I thought is interesting about Connor Hellebuyck, and he tends to defer to his teammates, and talked about when he was talking about, I think someone asked him in one of his scrums recently, something to the effect of, well, are you playing your best hockey? And he said, well, I'm actually being able to play a consistent brand because I know where the shots are coming from. Yeah. This team is playing so defensively solid that I know that this shot is going to be from that lane. So are you seeing a team that's connected to their goaltender, but also, again, you got to credit him for elevating a career and his game this year from a guy who has already had 2 Vezinas, going to have a 3rd one, but is even taking it up that step that they'll need from him this year.
Yeah, Dave, that's great assessment. Like, Connor hasn't been the goalie that I think sometimes people, that don't watch the team regularly think he is. You got the best goalie on the planet, and I think the automatic assumption is, they're winning because of him. Mm-hmm. And in the past, there has been that's been true to some degree. You go back 3 years, and the Winnipeg Jets gave up more high danger chances, slot shots, than any other team. And the type of shots that he had to face without him would have been nowhere near where they were. That's not true anymore. And I love the humility in Connor Hellebuyck, in the fact that he recognizes that, the relationship between a good goaltender and a good team is the fact that you are given predictability. And so he's building his game around that because he's got a good team in front of him. He's got a well-coached team in front of him. And it's not just for a week or a month. It's been now for 2 years plus, almost 3 years. And he hasn't had to steal very many games. We know he has that ability, but if he's doing that, we got troubles because you're not winning. And so the relationship between Connor Hellebuyck being a good goaltender because of the players in front of him, that's true. Very, very true. And then, of course, the team in front of him is good, and they are given the freedom to play with freedom. And that means 4 up in the attack all the time, right? You always got a D-man involved. And then coming back, you don't have to panic and lunge at a player in the offensive zone because you're caught. Trust. Work your way back to your own goaltender. If things break down, he's there. And because of that, things don't usually break down. He's got great numbers. He's breaking records, his own records, but it's not because he's an independent contractor out there. It's because of the fact that this is a 19-man unit, or 20, you know what I mean? In most every game, it's required to win.
Kevin Sawyer, our guest. Kevin, you know him from the TSN, Jets on TSN broadcast, working alongside our good friend Dan Robertson. Kevin, the 4th line for the Jets, Morgan Barron, got some run up the middle, and then, Gabe Vilardi goes out, Alex Iafallo gets bumped up, then Rasmus Kupari comes back in the lineup for that one game, and he goes back up the middle on that 4th line. Barron shifts to the wing, then now Kupari is injured, so Barron goes back up the middle. What is it about the dynamic that Morgan Barron brings as a centerman versus the winger that, to me, makes him more effective than when he was just playing on the wing on that 4th line?
Yeah, so I think every team would agree that if you can have a big, powerful centerman that can skate, I'll take that. I think every team would take that. So did the Jets know that they had that in Morgan Bear, and they didn't before the necessity, right? And what do they say? Invention is the mother of necessity, or necessity is the mother of invention. So they needed something. Kupari out, they put him there. So you look at what makes him good. He can win faceoffs. He's not a liability there. We already know that he can play a fourth line style, and he's got the IQ where he can be in the right place at the right time to break the puck out of his own end. He's got the speed to be able to get to all four corners of the ice. You know what? He has enough finish and enough hands to still be able to make plays. I think every centerman has to have that ability where, listen, the puck is going to go through the hands of the centerman if a line is going to generate offense or generate chances, although you're going to generate it in different ways. It's gone through his hands and hasn't died there. And that's really important. So you got size, physicality, he can skate, and he's proving that he's got enough IQ with very little experience at the NHL level at the center ice position. Just another area where this team has learned that they can go if need be. And right now they need him.
Kevin, I just wanted to ask you, kind of like stepping back, obviously all of us are hyper-focused on the Jets, and sometimes you kind of lose perspective of what's happening across the league, but you don't even have to go out of the division right now to see the best teams in the league right now. Like we talked about, like the Jets, it seemed like yesterday they had a 12-point lead on Dallas, and Dallas wins a couple games in a row and they're only 4 points back. But then Colorado, what are they, 12-2-2 or something like that in their last 16? And then St. Louis, obviously on the 8-game winning streak. I mean, how much are you kind of focusing on some of the other teams in the division, and just, you know, how impressed have you been with the quality of play? Because like we talked about earlier, right, like the Jets obviously are comfortably in a playoff spot, but they've got other teams that are kind of breathing down their necks, and it looks like, you know, there could easily be 5 teams from the Central making the playoffs.
Everybody coming into the year knew that the Central was going to be strong, but nobody really knew it was going to be in this way, right? Where, let's be honest, was everybody expecting Winnipeg to be the best team in the Central, let alone the best team in the league? No, they were expecting the Colorado Avalanche, the Nashville Predators, right? So, but still, the fact remains, and I think that's part of getting ready to win, is you have to be in a really competitive division. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's the strongest division in all of hockey right now. I think it's a good thing. I think that Dallas is winning those games in hand, where the Jets continue to play meaningful hockey, forcing them to, hey, not only do you have to win, but you've got some tough teams, right? Like with the Washington Capitals. That pressure, like I've said this in the past, where running as fast as you can is totally different than running for your life. And I mean that metaphorically, because to feel the pressure of it's do or die. There's never a do or die in the regular season unless you're, got to win your last game to get into the playoffs. There's never that pressure. That's real pressure, but you want to get as close to that as you possibly can to get ready for the playoffs. And I like the fact that Dallas is pushing, and I like the fact that the Central is now okay. Even in the first round, we might not have to play Colorado or Dallas, but there's no exhale because St. Louis is a team that a lot of teams don't want to face in the first round. So all of that stuff is a really good part of this dress rehearsal.
Kevin, 4 years ago in the All-Canadian division, that AHL bubble that we watched, the Cole Perfetti, and he wasn't supposed to play, of course, because he was 19, but he had that exemption. And one of the things that Pascal Vincent used to talk about, the old Moose coach, is that, a lot of his points were from the perimeter. And he slowly but surely kind of understood and adjusted in his game. Finally started to get it. I don't remember exactly when, but he started to understand where he needed to go to have success at the pro level. You could see that his brain was working. I thought Scott O'Neill's answer yesterday to the media, in his media availability, talking about Cole Perfetti following the morning skate, was similar to the way Pascal talked about him, in that he kind of was getting that adjustment. And you see that he's playing just with a much, more of an edge and more of a understanding of what he needs to do. Are you seeing that from him, even that step up in his performance and playing a role where last year, look, he was at this point of the year, he was coming out of the lineup. You're not taking him out at this point.
He and Dylan Sandberg are starting to piss me off because I can't decide which one's the most improved player. Listen, I don't think Cole would mind if I shared some of these stories because of, in the locker room, on the plane, and with these guys all the time. And through his toughest, darkest days, going back to last year where he went 23 games, I think it was 23, without scoring a goal, being healthy, scratched. You go talk to, he felt like a kid, and he's wide-eyed, but very real with himself about, like, I've never gone through this before in my life. He's always been like, what do you have, 111 points his last junior. And said it how much everybody else. Then you come to the NHL. I think that's why a lot of these star junior players or NCAA for as long as they do in the transition. So does he know and understands now how to play? He did last year when he was not scoring and getting healthy. He knew then too, but knowing and being able to do it are two totally different things. I give a ton of credit to Rick Bowness and Scott Arneal about being honest enough with him without breaking the spirit of the player, but also giving him enough belief and support and guidance so that he still feels like I can change my identity, add to my identity, and still be an effective player. What a colossal change. Like, I'll be honest with you. I'm asking myself in November, can this team win a Stanley Cup with Cole Perfetti in the top 6? The answer, honestly, was no, they cannot. I don't believe they can, because you have to play rugged. You have to be able to endure battles and physicality, and you have to be willing to go, not just go to the net or to the hard areas, but you have to be able to go there and make plays, man. You're a skilled guy. How good has he got? Not only does he just go there, but it's like he wants to now. And that clip against the Washington Capitals where he's getting cross-checked from Roy, Niederreiter comes and supports him. He gives it back to the guy. They draw a penalty. They get the puck to the net. If you need a clip, that's the one that says Cole Perfetti has arrived. He gets it. And it's not just for a little bit now. It's been for months. This guy, I'm so proud of him. I don't think I probably have the right to say that. But knowing peripherally what he's gone through mentally, physically to get to this stage, it's inspiring because it can be done. And what a message it is to everybody around that, hey, you can find a way to change who you are, add to who you are, and become way better. He is a totally different player than he was in November. That's a big change in a very short amount of time. It's impressive.
Kevin Sawyer, Jets on TSN analyst. He'll be on the call tomorrow afternoon as the Jets and the Vancouver Canucks do battle in downtown Winnipeg. Kevin, thanks so much for your insight. Thanks so much for your analysis. Great storytelling this morning. Always appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. You guys have a ton of fun. Let's do it again.
Yeah, we'll do it again real soon. Take care, Kevin. Thanks so much. There he goes, Kevin Sawyer joining us this morning. And then
we should have Kevin on for another full hour. I mean, that was great. We
just storytelling with Kevin Sawyer can be a new segment here on the program. I'm also going to depart. I'm going to go back to spend some time with my family. So I'll turn it over to Dave and Ezzy for the next hour. Don't go anywhere, everybody. Jeremy.
Wait, what are we supposed to talk about?
Well, you guys will figure it out. I'm confident you guys can drive this bus as well as I can. In fact,
Dave, it's the beginning of the Drew roast. That's what's going to happen.
That's right.
I was going to say,
roast me for the next hour.
When Drew said we're going to drive the bus, I'm like, we're going to drive the bus, all right, right over you.
That's perfectly fine. I'll tell you what, Dave. Get ready to send it to break. I'll let you click the button as I'm going to say goodbye. I'll say see everybody tomorrow for the post-game show. Dave M. and Ezzy Ginsburg for hour number 2 of the program up next, and Jeremy Rutherford joining at the bottom of the hour as well to talk about the St. Louis Blues. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. It continues on this Saturday morning.
We want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling sites instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now you might have questions like,
Do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Center. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime, visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue next to Canada Life Centre. Holt Dental, the new official dentist of Illegal Curve, has a philosophy rooted in two unyielding principles: genuinely caring about patients and providing outstanding service. Being a patient of Holt Dental means more than just checkups and treatments. It's taking the time to listen and talk to each patient so they can achieve the best long-term health, functionality, and aesthetics for their teeth, mouth, and gums. Conveniently located at Grant Park Festival on Taylor Avenue, Holt Dental is dentistry of the highest quality in a comfortable and relaxed environment. For more information, visit holtdental.ca. Oh, and there's plenty of free parking at the front door, too. Celebrating its 40th year as Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best and most affordable live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For more information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. It's a little fresher, a little crisper, it's a little less Mindelish. It's the Illegal Curve last hour of the show with Dave Minuk and Ezzy Ginsberg. We'll keep the Jets talk rolling. We'll maybe talk about some prospect news. We'll talk about the Manitoba Moose keeping their slim playoff hopes alive. And we hope that you'll be part of the discussion here on this show this Saturday morning. Of course, before you even get to be part of it, you got to smash that like button. That's kind of a requirement. I tried to trick everybody when I think it was Dark Moon said, if you think Connor Hellebuyck should be the MVP, press 1. I said, well, if you think Connor Hellebuyck should be the MVP, smash the like button. That's a better way of representing if you believe that. So if there's over 400 people in the chat, hopefully we get 400 likes, as we'll see if we can do that. But, let's start there. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Connor Hellebuyck continues to put on performance after performance. One of the questions I have tomorrow is, he's played the last few games. Do you think tomorrow would be a Connor Hellebuyck after we know how much he loves those afternoon games, Ezzy, or do you think they go back with Eric Comrie and give him a shot in what would be his second Sunday afternoon game after playing against the Sabres?
Yeah, I mean, Eric Comrie had a couple starts in a row, or pardon me, he had 2 starts in 3 games, right? When he played against Seattle, and then he played against Buffalo, right?
Yep.
So you don't see that very often where Comrie gets 2 of 3 starts. So, and considering, Dave, the time between games, obviously, a couple days between the Capitals Devils game, but then before that, you had a couple days off between the Oilers game and the Sabres game. So that would kind of make me believe that Hellebuyck gets the start tomorrow, just kind of hunch. And then kind of looking forward into April, obviously, the Jets are still going to be trying to lock up a President's Trophy, but I kind of look at those games on the road and I see Comrie getting one of those games. I don't know if it's against LA. That's kind of what I'm thinking, or maybe against Vegas, or do you ride Hellebuyck against LA and Vegas, and then Comrie gets the game against Utah, which kind of ends that 3-game Western trip, right, Dave?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's interesting, and kind of just going back to what you said earlier, Dave, about Connor Hellebuyck just keeps putting up shutouts. He just keeps winning. He just keeps furthering this fantastic season that he's having. Those MVP chants, you were in the building yesterday, like those MVP chants, at least I think you were in the building last night. You weren't in the building. Okay. I was, it's funny, Dave, because, I'm usually, watching the games from my St. James home.
Yeah.
I was obviously at the game with my sister yesterday. That the atmosphere And we talked about the atmosphere, for the Jets Capitals game. I mean, last night, Friday night, obviously, the Jets coming off of the huge win over Washington, and those MVP chants. Like, I just kept thinking, how electric that building is going to be for game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, because, fans, as like, fans are ready for the playoffs, right? Like, this hasn't been a year where, we've been waiting for the Jets to make like a late season run to get into the playoffs. The Jets have been firmly in first place in their division and conference for that matter for most of the season. But, it's unbelievable. We had a couple comments up earlier just talking about how it looked like everything was in slow motion in front of Hellebuyck. Like, that was one of the easier shutouts. I think you'd agree, Dave, that, he made a few decent saves.
Yep.
But it just wasn't a high event, high shot volume game. And, I think that's scary for any other team that is facing the Jets, is that Hellebuyck has the ability to just shut the door and just not allow teams anything, right? And teams around the league know how good Hellebuyck is. And as we were talking about before, it seems like, once he makes a few saves early in a game, and if the game is, if he hasn't allowed a goal after a couple periods, it's the Jets are able as a team to kind of get into that shutdown defensive mode, and you're most likely not scoring on Hellebuyck because he wants those shutouts. He will tell you himself that, he wants the win. That's the most important thing, but he's always striving for the shutout, right? Like, he's a perfectionist, as you know, right, Dave? So it's just been incredible. And it seems like, you almost get sick sometimes of talking about it. I mean, I don't personally, but he's just so good that you've come to expect this excellence from Hellebuyck, right? Like, you don't expect him to be very good. You expect him to post a shutout, or you expect him to only allow a goal or two. So last night was just another example of how dominant and just how confident he can be. And, he's going to win the Vezina Trophy. And, just as an aside, Dave, I kind of wanted to bring this up with you. I didn't message you or Drew about this, but, all the talk about, well, Hellebuyck has to hit 50 wins. Like, Marty Biron mentioned that last week on the show, right?
Yep.
I agree with Marty. Obviously, I love Marty, but Hellebuyck is the MVP of this league, in my opinion, right? Like, obviously, there's some other players in the league, namely, Nathan McKinnon and Draisaitl, and like Nikita Kucherov is obviously having a crazy good year, right, Dave? There's other around the league. But I just think, like, when you consider everything, I just think that he deserves, at the very least, he should be a Hart Trophy finalist, Dave. And yes, are we biased? And obviously, we'll get people in the chat here. Obviously, like, people like Tyler Young are going to agree with me here. I posted the wrong comment. Pat Falloon is better than Jimmy Fallon. That was the comment I wanted to post from Tyler Young, MVP, right? But it's just incredible what he's done. And I think what's the most impressive, Dave, is that he makes it look easy, right? Like, a game like last night, I've kind of repeated myself. I sound like a broken record, but I mean, the Devils just didn't have enough traffic in front of him. They weren't getting enough second chances. Like, Hellebuyck was just in that zone. And we've covered this team for years. And you kind of just got that feeling early on in this game that Hellebuyck was going to get a shutout because of the way the Jets were playing in front of him. Yeah. And there's just something about him when he gets in that zone. It's really incredible. So I think that I agree with Kenny's water bottle. Dave is the MVP of Illegal Curve and possibly of the province of Manitoba for his Jets coverage on illegalcurve.com and this show. But it's incredible. It really is. And, he's definitely going to be rested, I think, going down the stretch. Like, I think, we talked about this earlier, Dave. Like, the Braden Holtby Martin Brodeur record, I really think doesn't factor in to Scott Arniel and Wade Flaherty's plans. Like, I don't think they're thinking, well, Hellebuyck can break the record here. Like, I think they have an idea of where he needs to play. And to your point, like, is there a possibility Comrie gets to start tomorrow afternoon? Yes. But I think the way Hellebuyck played yesterday and the fact that there's been some days off between games, that's kind of, I'm leaning towards Hellebuyck. But if they do go with Comrie, obviously Comrie did not have a very good game against Buffalo. I mentioned this on the postgame show, Dave. I didn't think he was as bad as some people thought. I think he's actually had a very underrated season for the Jets. I think the drop-off from Lauren Brossoit to Eric Comrie has been negligible.
I'd agree.
Comrie has given them very good backup goaltending. So even if he does get to start tomorrow, I mean, the Jets still have a very good chance at beating that Canucks team.
And we'll just kind of round out the Hellebuyck talk, and Connor Habchek's next day thoughts, of course, available on a little site called illegalcurve.com, available now. One of his sections was about Connor Hellebuyck and Connor Hellebuck's response to the fans chanting MVP. That's really cool. They really believe in me, and I'm really grateful to have them around and spend my career here. It means a lot. And it does, and you can tell. And so definitely go and check that out. And as Connor writes, a big part of the shutout was the perfect 3 for 3 on the PK. And again, that's one of the things, as we talked about, has been improving with this Jets team, has been their penalty kill, even though their power plays cooled off a bit. Their PK has improved, which is important. I think it's actually as important as the power play going into the playoffs. And he goes, further to what Hellebuyck was saying last night, I think our details are right. Our positioning was right, and we're reading the game and jumping them when we had a chance. And it takes everyone, including me, when I need to make a save. And when guys are tight around me, I can see pucks. Things get a little bit easier. So, again, Connor Hellebuyck, and someone asked, what are his goals saved above expected? Plus 36, number 1 in the league. Logan Thompson next.
Is that good? I think that's good. Yeah,
it's pretty good. And the next closest goaltender to him is Logan Thompson at plus 30, and then Igor Shesterkin at plus 22. So we know that Connor Hellebuyck is having himself a helly of a good season, and the fact of the matter is, another thing that folks are forgetting, the Jets will most likely be the winners of the William Jennings Award for the second year in a row, because they've got 10 fewer goals allowed than the Los Angeles Kings at 172. The Kings have allowed 182. So the Jets most likely will get that award as well. Again, all these little awards, these personal individual awards or team awards, they're nice. We know what the Jets are interested in winning. And let's switch our focus before we bring Jeremy Rutherford to talk about, the Jets are the top team in the division, but the hottest team, of course, are the St. Louis Blues. So we'll be talking to Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic in about 13 minutes. We'll talk about those red hot St. Louis Blues. Will this be a repeat of 2019, as when they did what was unexpected, was make the playoffs and then go on that unexpectedly incredible run, which came at the expense of the Winnipeg Jets in round 1. But from your perspective, we look around the Central, and we've talked about what a murderer's row it is: the Dallas Stars, the Colorado Avalanche, and of course, St. Louis right now. Minnesota. It's actually shocking when you look at Minnesota, because for the longest time, the Minnesota Wild were like 3rd and 4th spot in the NHL, and then of course, with no Kirill Kaprizov, with no Joel Eriksson Ek, they've lost Jared Spurgeon, they've lost a number of guys, they've had tons of injuries this year. And while they, were looking for a while that they were going to fall out of it, they beat the Washington Capitals after the Jets softened them up a little bit. But from your perspective, when you look at the matchups, the potentials for the Jets, obviously we've talked about how critical it is for them to finish first. What are you thinking in terms of how they match up against some of their potential first round opponents?
Yeah, no, I think, I'm glad you brought it up, Dave, because it's really kind of what all Jets fans are talking about now, in addition to obviously, the wins and the fact that the Jets are now ahead of the Washington Capitals, but everybody's kind of looking at those standings, and it's not clear at all who the Jets might play, right? Because as we talked about, Vancouver has a game in hand on St. Louis, but they're 4 points back, and St. Louis just keeps winning. Like, they won't lose. And, it looked like a month ago, there was a good chance the Calgary Flames were going to grab that second wildcard spot. And now I believe, Dave, they're 6 points back.
With games in hand, though.
With games in hand, but still 6 points back. So they're kind of, on the outside looking in, obviously. But I look at the St. Louis Blues, and it's a dangerous team, right? Like, obviously, Jordan Binnington has benefited from his play at the Four Nations face-off. But and you look at a guy like Dylan Holloway, like, how good is that signing looking right now for the Blues?
I'll tell you right now, people in Edmonton are pissed about losing about those offer sheets,
and they should be, right, Dave? Because I mean, a big reason why they couldn't keep Broberg and Arvidsson is because they brought in Jeff Skinner and they brought in Victor Arvidsson, right? So that money was tied up in their salary cap. And obviously, we just saw Jeff Skinner score a couple goals against the Jets. But you would agree, Dave, Jeff Skinner has not had a great year.
No.
Considering he's a regular 30-goal guy, right? So the St. Louis Blues have been an awesome story. I mean, I think, players like Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou are very underrated for what they do. They're not guys that, put up 100-point seasons, but they're solid, like 70, 80-point guys. They've just got a very well-rounded team. But I look at, if it's between, let's say, St. Louis, Vancouver, and Minnesota, I like Minnesota as a matchup for the Jets. I know, kind of, off air, Dave, me, you, and Drew have kind of gone back and forth. I mean, I don't want to play St. Louis right now. I mean, they've been playing playoff hockey for a couple of months now. And obviously Jim Montgomery's a great coach, but I look at Minnesota and it speaks to what you were saying about, having guys like Kirill Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson Ek out of the lineup. The Wild don't score a lot of goals. And obviously the Jets are one of the best defensive and offensive teams in the league. But I look at the Minnesota Wild and yes, they've got a lot of talent there, but I think that the Jets would be able to, I'm not going to say easily defeat the Wild in a first round matchup. Even though Primetimer wants to see the Jets and Flames. Look, I mean, I'm all for a Canadian, an old Smythe division first round matchup, right, Dave? If that could be the Canucks or the Flames, like you talked about, and you're right. I mean, the Flames do have 3 games in hand on St. Louis, but I'm going to stick to my original answer, Dave. I'm thinking if it's the Jets and Wild, and I'm not saying it's going to be a repeat of the 2018 playoffs, but we remember what happened with Dustin Byfuglien laying out Mikko Koivu behind the net, and the Jets just, I would say, easily defeating the Wild. Everybody remembers Bruce Boudreau and his 4-letter F-bomb after the Jets. I forget what the score was in that game at that point, Dave. It might have been like 4-0 or something. I'm talking about the first game that was in Winnipeg. And by the way, the atmosphere in that building for that game, I remember sitting beside you. It was incredible. But I just think that the Wild would be totally overmatched by the Jets. Maybe they win a game, but I still stand by that. I think if the Jets and Wild play in the first round, maybe it goes to 6 games, but I'm probably saying 5 games the Jets can beat the Wild. I just don't think they have enough offense, and I think that the Jets would just overwhelm them with their speed and their talent. And not to say that they wouldn't put up a fight, but I wouldn't want to play St. Louis right now. I'm sticking to that answer.
Well, I mean, look, I think it's a good answer, and I think it's a fun thought exercise. And the team actually I thought was probably the one that the Jets didn't want to face, and it seems like they won't have to worry about it. Well, they won't have to worry about it. Was Utah? I thought Utah, is a tenacious team. They're a fast team, and I thought that they could play the Jets tough. But like I said, they've fallen off. And they're not going to be one of those teams that's potentially a first-round opponent.
I don't think they have the depth, Dave, right? Like, I realize that's a cliche.
Yeah.
And we always talk about that. But, Logan Cooley, obviously Dylan Gunther, Clayton Keller, Nick Schmaltz. Like, I mean, they've got a lot of good pieces there. I just think that they're still a couple years away. I just wanted to get that in there. I think Utah's been a nice story. I think when you compare them to St. Louis or Minnesota, like there's kind of a clear drop off there in talent.
Yeah. No, I don't think I don't think there's any question, but I just thought because originally I wasn't thinking Minnesota was even an option, to be honest with you, as I wasn't expecting as steep a drop off in the Wild as they've experienced. And, like we talked about, it's an interesting thought argument as to, do you need to be hot to go into the playoffs, and how much of an effect does that have? You could say, oh, these guys have had to be playing playoff hockey. But does that take a toll on you because you've had to be sharp now for 20 games? Whereas again, I truly believe that there are teams that are coasting in. I don't think the Florida Panthers are playing at 100%. And I'm not saying that because of injuries, I'm just saying I think these guys know what it takes. And I think that there's going to be teams like that, the Tampa Bay Lightning, teams that have multi Stanley Cup champions on them. They know what it takes to win in that environment. And I don't think that they're, giving it 100% for every single regular season game. I think they know that they can, do what they need to do.
The East to me, Dave, I was going to say, like, the East is a mystery to me. Like, obviously we focus more on the Central and the Western Conference, but I look even I'm going to, kind of mention who I picked to win the Stanley Cup at the beginning of the season, just because it'll make myself feel better when they get knocked out in the first round. But the Carolina Hurricanes are 8-2 in their last 10, right? Yeah. Like they're a team that has kind of been in second or third the whole year in that Metro division, obviously, because Washington has held down first in the division. Yeah. But I look at Carolina and I don't like that matchup for the Devils in the first round. I don't like that matchup at all. And so I could easily see Carolina giving Washington a run for their money in the second round. Like, I just think, I agree with what you're saying. The two Florida teams obviously are always going to be dangerous with all the Stanley Cup experience and the talent and everything like that. But I think, if it's wide open, it's more wide open in the East than I would say in the West. Like I look at the West, and there's obviously, all the great, performances that we're seeing in the Central Division on a daily basis. Like Dallas, Colorado, and St. Louis don't lose, but the Jets also rarely lose, right? So, I mean, it's just everybody's winning. But I think when you look at the top teams in the West versus the bottom teams in the West, to me at least, there is a disparity. Not saying that we can't see an upset in the first round, but I'm looking at that Dallas Colorado series in the first round and just thinking to myself, like, just suck that to my veins. Like that's got to be at least a 6-gamer there. Should be an amazing series, and then there's a good chance, obviously, the Jets will play the winner of that series. But I mean, this is what you love to see, right, Dave? At this point of the year, you love to see the fact that you've got playoff races in both the West and the East. And, we mentioned the East earlier, like the Rangers are still sticking around. Obviously, the Montreal Canadiens would be a great story. But the Columbus Blue Jackets, right? They kind of keep going in and out of a playoff spot.
Yeah.
I was actually sitting beside Sean Monahan's cousin yesterday. So shout out to, his name's Patrick. He was telling me how much Sean Monahan loved playing in Winnipeg and how he was trying to convince Monahan to sign in Winnipeg. But I mean, how good of a story would that be, just with obviously what happened with Johnny Gaudreau and his brother? So whether it's Columbus or Montreal, it's going to be a feel-good story if either of those teams end up getting that last wild card spot.
Well, I've got the comment by Brian Harder highlighted right now. It says, during the Blues' 8-game win streak, they have played only one game against the playoff team. They played the Preds 3 times in the streak. Not worried about them. And that's sometimes important, right? We're, as you mentioned, you said this, and you 100% agree with you, Ezzy. We are hyper-focused on what happens with the Jets and pro hockey in general here in Manitoba. Of course, the Manitoba Moose. We'll talk about them after we finish our chat with Jeremy. But those are things that we're not necessarily aware of. So you see 8 wins, you're like, ooh, that's impressive. But if you beat the team that, by the way, the Nashville Predators, the team everybody picked to be either first in the Central, Stanley Cup, blah, blah, blah. By the way, they were officially eliminated from the playoffs. I think it was either yesterday or the day before. So
I would argue, though, obviously, Brian, good friend of the show, but I would argue, though, they're still winning those games, right? Like they have needed, like they have to win. They've had to play desperate for what? 5 weeks now, 6 weeks now.
There's no question.
So look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? Like the Toronto Maple Leafs were humming along, and they end up losing 6-5 to the San Jose Sharks. And the Leafs have lost to the Sharks twice this year. The Jets have lost twice to the Ducks this year. They've lost to the Sabres, right? Yeah. So all I'm saying is that even like you've said this so many times before, Dave, you play the competition in front of you. You're not going to apologize for playing a lesser opponent and beating them, right? So I know what Brian is saying, but
I think
the Blues, I still think that the Blues, even though their schedule might be a little bit easier, Dallas, another situation where their strength of schedule is much easier, certainly, than the Jets' schedule right now. Yeah. But they're winning these games, right? So good teams do that. Good teams will beat teams regardless of where they are in the standings. So all I'm saying is I still think the Blues are going to be a formidable opponent in the first round. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think it's key. Like it's just, but I guess what I'm saying is it's peeling away the layers, right? Like if you look at the Jets, they have the number 1 power play or number 2 power play in the NHL. But then we know, I mean, again, if you just looked at that, you'd say, okay, the Jets have the second best power play. But we know that the Jets power play has struggled of late, and it wasn't humming along at the historic rate it was at earlier in the season. So I'm just saying it's sometimes good to peel back a layer or two and figure out exactly what's going on with teams. But ultimately, and as I think the key of my kind of summation of this, we'll go to break, then we're going to bring Jeremy on. But I think the key for me is the Jets are going to have to play tough opponents. You're not going to get an easy opponent. I got to tell you, even if you play the Minnesota Wild, that's going to be a war of attrition. That is going to be, you think Ryan Hartman is going to be light and not physical? Joel Eriksson Ek, if he's able to play, is a physical guy, Foligno, physical guy, that's going to be a hell of a series if you play the Minnesota Wild. Do I think the Jets win? I do. Do I think they come out unscathed? I don't. I mean, that's just the reality of playoff hockey. So whether it's the Blues, the Wild, the Canucks, the Flames, I got to tell you, the Canucks less so, the Flames, I think that also would be kind of a war of attrition. So to me, any of these sort of first round opponents, do I think the Jets win? 100% I think they do. Do I think the Jets are going to have some tough games? Absolutely. Okay. Well, that was a good discussion. Of course, we love to have these fire in our belly, as I saw the comment in the chat.
It's getting closer, Dave. We're inching closer and closer to the playoffs, right? Like you can almost taste it at this point. or at least I can taste it. I might be tasting the sausage bagel that I had earlier today, but no, I can absolutely I can taste the playoffs at this point. And with the atmosphere in the building yesterday and just the buzz, like people are ready for the whiteout. People are dusting off those white shirts and those white jerseys, Dave.
Well, people are ready for the whiteout. They're not ready for the whiteout that we experienced on the roads the other day, but hopefully that'll be gone soon, and we'll be back to some nice spring Manitoba weather. Of course, this is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I'm Dave Minuk. He's Ezzy Ginsberg. We've been chatting about the Jets for an hour and a half. We'll keep another half an hour of hockey talk coming up with Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic in St. Louis. But for now, by the way, while we head to commercial break, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you're subscribing to this YouTube channel. And of course, when you watch the videos, by the way, that pretty much we and the Jets are the only ones who post any of the Jets videos, the Moose videos, well, we're the only ones in addition to the Moose who post them. Make sure you hit the like button when you're watching those videos as well. That helps us out. Anyways, we're going to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be back for some Blues talk with Jeremy Rutherford.
We want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling sites instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now you might have questions like,
Do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Centre. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime, visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Centre. Holt Dental, the new official dentist of Illegal Curve, has a philosophy rooted in two unyielding principles: genuinely caring about patients and providing outstanding service. Being a patient of Holt Dental means more than just checkups and treatments. It's taking the time to listen and talk to each patient so they can achieve the best long-term health, functionality, and aesthetics for their teeth, mouth, and gums. Conveniently located at Grant Park Festival on Taylor Avenue, Holt Dental is dentistry of the highest quality in a comfortable and relaxed environment. For more information, visit holtdental.ca. Oh, and there's plenty of free parking at the front door too. Celebrating its 40th year as Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best and most affordable live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For more information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I'm Dave Minuk. He's Ezzy Ginsberg. And, we got to talk about the hottest team. And we talk about the number one team in the NHL on this show, generally speaking, Ezzy, or the number one team in the West, I should say. But we're going to talk about the hottest team in the entire NHL. And that is, of course, the St. Louis Blues. We go to St. Louis to talk to our good friend, Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic. Hey, Jeremy, how are you?
Good. How you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, of course. And peel back the layers for us. I mean, we are hyper-focused on the show about the Winnipeg Jets. We've seen the St. Louis Blues throughout the season, of course. But in this run, what exactly is going right for the St. Louis Blues team to perform kind of like what they did in 2019?
Yeah, first of all, there's nobody in St. Louis, including myself, who saw this coming. That's first and foremost. Like, you look back in St. Louis now, whenever you talk about is the team out of it? Everybody points to 2019 and says you're never out of it. But, let's be realistic. How often does something like that happen? So the other thing is the Blues are in a retool. So the Blues weren't in a retool in 2018-19. They were one of the top 3 teams in terms of contending for a Stanley Cup in the league. So this is completely different. And I know you guys know that, but I'm just kind of emphasizing that. But I think what happened was the break. That's the biggest thing. This team was on fumes. Nothing was going right. Even the nights that they played well, they didn't get the results. So they got frustrated. So you have the break, and all of a sudden you see on Instagram, they're all out on a Fiji island, right? And I think they just hit the reset button in terms of their mentality. Well, then they came back to St. Louis, and they weren't getting a lot of zone time. So what did Jim Montgomery do? He went back home to Boston. You remember he started the season with the Boston Bruins, right?
Yeah.
In Boston. And he's going over things that they need to improve. And one of them was the forecheck. So they come back to St. Louis and they spend 3 or 4 days working on the forecheck. And I'm telling you guys, I know that sounds simplistic, but they are so much more aggressive in the offensive zone. They spend way more time in the offensive zone, and now they don't have to defend a lot. And so that, to me, is the biggest area improvement. And when you're good on the forecheck and you're spending a lot of time in the offensive zone, what's happening? Well, now you're using all 4 lines, right? And the Blues were successful in 2019 because they ran the 4 lines. And now they have a line here in St. Louis. They've nicknamed it the WTF. You can catch my drift there. WTF. And it's Walker, Toropchenko, and Foxa, the WTF line. And I mean, at times this line's been one of their best lines. Robert Thomas, Buchnevich have played better since the break. They're 14-2-2 since the break at .833 percentage. Like you guys said, hottest team in the league. And somehow, some way, this team that was left for dead is going to make the playoffs, it looks like.
Jeremy, we have to. You didn't mention him there, and I was hoping that you might, because I was kind of just play off of you there. But I obviously follow you on social media, and if anybody doesn't, you should be following Jeremy for the record. But I mean, Dylan Holloway, right? Like, that was a huge story in the offseason, those offer sheets to Philip Broberg and Holloway. And as you mentioned, not only is he on a 9-game point streak, but 5 of those games are multi-point games. Like, the fans in Edmonton must just be absolutely furious right now that they lost Holloway.
It's unbelievable. I think I've probably lost more Edmonton followers this year on Twitter. That's probably what's happened. I was on a show yesterday, and they were down on Edmonton's playoff chances. And I said, why are you guys down on Edmonton? They've got Draisaitl, they've got Broberg, they've got Holloway. Oh, wait, they don't have those guys. Never mind. It's like one of those deals where time goes by and things start to, okay, well, that makes sense now. This, to me, still doesn't make sense. Like, I have no idea how the Blues were able to pull Holloway and Broberg out of Edmonton. And listen, I always tell the story that Doug Armstrong didn't have this master plan months and months in advance, because he traded the 2nd-round pick to Pittsburgh to dump the Kevin Hayes contract, and you needed that 2nd-round pick to make the offer sheets to Broberg and Holloway. So he had to go back to Pittsburgh and get that 2nd-round pick. So we're talking after the draft. And so anyway, Edmonton doesn't match. We all know the story, but Holloway has been phenomenal. And listen, you can catch the highlights, or you can look at the stats and say, holy smokes, I can't believe he got away. This is a guy, I think he's only going to get better. He is legit the last guy on the ice 1 hour after practice every single day. We were doing an interview with the coach one time. We heard pucks in the background, an area that the media is not allowed to go to, but we could hear the pucks. And we asked a question about Dylan Holloway, and the coach said, that's probably him shooting back there right now. And I went to the PR guy and I said, hey, can you go back and check and see who that is? And he ran back there, came back. He said, it's Dylan Holloway. I mean, like, that's him in a nutshell.
Well, Jeremy, the biggest question I have is Jordan Binnington, because we know, again, you talk about left for dead. People were when he was named the Team Canada goaltender for the 4 Nations, everyone was lamenting the state of Canadian goaltending. And we know what, Jordan Binnington did in 2019. What do you think that 4 Nations win did in terms of for the benefit to him for the rest of the season?
It was massive for Jordan Binnington, because he heard all of the critics saying that Canada doesn't have any goaltending, and he wanted to be that guy. And then he got that job, and then the first game or two, there were a couple hiccups, and everybody was ready to say, okay, he had his chance, let's move on. I'm not trying to be a Jordan Binnington honk. The save percentage hasn't been great over the years, but what I will say, which has been said a lot, is that he's just a gamer. Like, if you have a big game that you need a goaltender to win, and even though I wasn't in any of those meetings, obviously with Team Canada and Doug, trying to make the case for Jordan Binnington to the Team Canada staff, I can imagine being in there and hearing Doug saying, listen, guys, there might be a goal or two that gets by, but just believe me, he'll show up when it counts. And he did. And he comes back to St. Louis, and I think he's got all that confidence after what happened at Four Nations. Has he had a game or two, goal or two he'd like to have back for sure. But yeah, he has come in here and said, all right, guys, let's go do this thing.
Helps that he's familiar with winning in that arena.
Yeah. Yeah, with that TD Garden, he loves that place.
Oh, for sure. And I wanted to ask you about Brayden Schenn, Jeremy, because obviously before the trade deadline, I know we're going back a couple weeks now, but before the trade deadline, there were a lot of Jets fans that kind of were looking at St. Louis. And obviously, like you said, this has been an unexpected run. But a lot of people were looking at a guy like Brayden Schenn thinking, well, that would look like a good second line center for the Jets. How close were they, and why was the decision ultimately made? Obviously, it is proving to be the right decision to keep Schenn, but what was kind of that process like? Because I think a lot of Jets fans watching and listening right now would love to know kind of, how close he was to being dealt.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see Brayden and Luke in Winnipeg, right?
Yeah.
I think that, you always got the who's buying, who's selling, and the Blues were kind of right there in the middle. Like, what do you do here? They only had a couple of UFAs, Ryan Suter and Radek Faksa. So what do you do with those guys? It's not like you're getting, high picks in return. But Brayden Schenn has 3 years left on the deal. So if you're moving into a new era in Blues hockey with the Dvorskys and with the Snuggerudes, do you try to get yourself, out from under 3 more years of a guy who will be 36 at the end of his contract? So I think the Blues entertained the idea. There was obviously some interest. I think that the Blues talked to Brayden about it. And I think at the end of the day, he wanted to stay with this team. The one thing that he said in an interview that kind of caught my attention was he said, I didn't want to walk away from this team. So was he approached to waive his no trade? Quite possibly. We don't know that for sure. The one thing I do feel comfortable saying too is I think there were only 1 or 2 spots that he was going to entertain the idea of going to. I think Colorado was one of them. And, that I might not have been on the table. I don't know. But Toronto obviously was a big interested team, and that didn't work. So he stays put, and he's been a catalyst in getting the Blues back to the playoffs.
Jeremy, in terms of, again, you watch this team, you cover this team more than anybody that we know. Who has caught your eye? Which player has kind of been like an unsung hero and really helped to keep this team consistent during this run?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Number one, which we just talked about, Hellebuyck, he's been amazing. I know maybe he doesn't fit the unsung hero just because people are familiar with him. Unsung hero, I would say Zach Bolduc. If you don't watch the Blues a lot, probably not too familiar with him, but he is a first-round pick, from a Montreal area kid. He has really taken the next step. So when Drew Bannister was the coach earlier in the year, he scratched him a few times. Fans got upset. They said, he can play. This is a retool. Get him out there. But you know how it is with some of these coaches. They want them to learn the right way, right? And so they did that with Zach Bolduc. Kind of an interesting tidbit to that is your guy Alexander Steen, the GM in waiting here in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
There was one game where Bolduc's sitting in the press box with his suit on, and Steen came out in between periods and showed him some shifts that he really teach during the game. And so Bolduc has been terrific. I think he's up to 15 goals now. He's got some physicality to his game. They didn't like a hit from Blankenberg in Nashville the other day, so Bolduc goes up and gets a major cross-checking. He's $2,000 lighter in the wallet. So if and when Jets and Blues do hook up here, you want to keep an eye on Zach Bolduc.
I love it. Fans will love that too. And I felt a little bit bad yesterday, Jeremy. I was texting you to see if you could come on the show yesterday, and you were breaking the Jimmy Snuggerud signing news. So I was like, obviously Jeremy has better things to do at this moment, but we obviously appreciate you coming on, because obviously you go back to the TSN 1290 days with us. But I wanted to, for those who didn't read your article, because I know you wrote about this for The Athletic, but what is the kind of short-term plan with Jimmy Snuggerud? Is he a possibility to play some meaningful games for the Blues, or is this still a situation where maybe he gets a game or two and this is a signing more so for next year?
It's the craziest thing, because a month and a half ago, literally, when this team was dead, people said, can't wait till Snuggerud gets here and pop him in the lineup and watch him play the last 7 games. Now it's like, where does Snuggerud fit? Like, it's so crazy how things have changed. So he signed yesterday. He's not going to play today in Colorado. The Blues have 2 days off. They're going to get a couple practices in with Jimmy. Could he play next Tuesday against Detroit? Quite possibly. Blues have 8 games left, 7 after today in Colorado. So I think he's going to play a couple of games, but they're really going to have to be careful. I get it. You want to get, the good young prospect in there, but they've got something going that, I saw it in 2019. There's a different situation, but they've got something going, and you guys know how it goes. You don't want to fool with that chemistry, right? So, is he better than a couple of the players in the lineup skill-wise? For sure. But whatever they've got going, you don't want to mess with it. I think he'll get a couple games in before it's all said and done, though.
Jeremy, we tend to focus on the Blues, or, whichever team, whoever we're talking to, the team they cover. But so I'm going to ask you about a player who's not on the Blues, but he's tied to the St. Louis area, because a week ago it was an emotional game. Pat Maroon playing his final game in St. Louis. What was that like, being there and just kind of covering a guy who's such a colorful guy and playing in what he knew was going to be his final game in his hometown?
Yeah, it was great. No, and I thank you for the question. I love talking about Pat, because, he scored that double OT goal in the playoffs against the Dallas Stars. I was at The Athletic. I was at that time still, and I didn't have a deadline. I don't think I turned my story in until like 4 a.m. that night, but I waited out his parents. So over the years, I've become kind of tight with his parents in terms of, writing the story with them, right? And so I see the other day a tweet that says Pat Maroon announces that he's going to retire after the year. He tells Darren Pang in a pregame interview. And I'm like, what? Holy smokes. Yeah. So anyway, I figured his folks, family, they all had to be there. So I texted a couple of them, went down in between periods and caught up with them. And guys, it was pretty cool, because the way the Blues responded to the situation, quick on their feet, you find out that Pat's going to retire. He's a hometown hero. Just ask him. He'll tell you, And so anyway, some of the family was caught off guard. He was kind of keeping this to himself, and his brother's sitting in section 121, and all of a sudden there's a video saying, "Congratulations, Pat," and he's like, "What's going on here?" So, we see those video tributes all the time. Yeah, players skate onto the ice and wave, but this one was really special because he's from St. Louis. His last game in St. Louis. Can you imagine St. Louis Blues fans cheering for a player wearing the Chicago Blackhawks? This was unbelievable. So his mom's in the crowd crying. And then the coolest part, I'll just put a bow tie on this here. The Blues made him the #1 star of the game. So he did the interview on the bench. And I'm telling you, there were 18,000 people there. Not many left. They all stood and applauded the enemy, who is their native son there.
You love to see that, right? And it's awesome that you were able to share that, because 3-time Stanley Cup champion. I mean, what a career for Patrick Maroon. It seemed like he was winning the Stanley Cup every year for longer than 3 years in a row. But an incredible career for obviously a guy who scored some big goals. But he's more of a obviously kind of depth guy, right? So love to hear that about Patrick Maroon. And I wanted to ask you, Jeremy, just quickly about Colton Parayko, because he was obviously great in the Four Nations tournament for Canada. We're just trying to rub it in right now that Canada won that game, Jeremy. just kidding. But obviously, I mean, there were significant contributions from multiple players on the Blues, right? So I think it's worth mentioning. And obviously, Parayko, for those who don't know, he's out with the knee injury. Is there a chance that he could be back for the first round, or is it really kind of too early to say with the nature of the injury?
Yeah, he should be back. The 6-week timetable on the knee scope took him to the end of the regular season and should be ready for the playoffs. That was the initial plan. He's skating with the team. So Jim Montgomery said recently that he expects him to be back before the 6 weeks.
Okay, that's great news. Great news. Good to hear.
Excuse me, guys. I'm sorry.
All good, Jeremy. You know, keeping it going. I mean, it's funny because we talk about longevity in hockey, and you know, Kevin Cheveldayoff, the only GM, of course, that the Winnipeg Jets have ever known. And when we talk about, you know, the longest tenured GM, of course, you got to look at Doug Armstrong, and we know that the GM in waiting is a kid from Winnipeg and Alex Steen. I remember him when he was a little kid playing rec hockey in River Heights. But the fact of the matter is that we know he's gonna take over when Doug Armstrong retires. But from your perspective, like, what was the expectation of this team? You know, you talk about that kind of retool, and then they go and make the offer sheets. Was the expectation that this team, like, was this? I guess what I'm asking is was this part of Doug Armstrong's plan, or as you said, is it something that kind of changed on the fly when they realized they could make these offer sheets and kind of upgrade their retool more effectively?
Yeah, no, that's a great observation. The expectations for this team the past couple of years have been, they want to retool, but they want to put a competitive team on the ice. And you guys know how hard that is, right? You know, even Craig Berube, when he left, he said, it's tough. You got to win now and also win for the future and play the young kids.
Mm-hmm.
I think Doug Armstrong was extremely disappointed that this did not look like a playoff team the first half of the year. They hired Jim Montgomery and made that very difficult decision because they felt that Jim Montgomery could get this team to win sooner. And then also because of his background, you know, have success with the younger players as well. Doug Armstrong himself said exactly what you said, that he feels like the Broberg Holloway pickups, you know, sped up the retool. And he's exactly right. Like, they would not be even sniffing a playoff spot if it weren't for those two. So, you know, nobody could have predicted those transactions, but they happened. It sped things up. And, you know, Doug's plan all along, even though maybe it didn't look like it was going to be possible where they could be competitive and still, you know, still be happy about Snuggerud and Dvorsky and all these prospects who are on the way, it has materialized exactly like he hoped it would.
Jeremy, just one last question for me. I wanted to go back to, you mentioned Ryan Suter, and obviously, you know, Ryan Suter, he was playing on Dallas last year. And I think when the Blues brought him over, you know, there were some people that kind of wondered, like, what's left in the tank for Ryan Suter. And I was going to ask you, like, do you think he's getting enough credit? Obviously he's had a great career, but is he getting enough credit? Like, he's playing, you know, 17, 18 minutes a night for the Blues at 40 years old. And it just seems like, you know, he's just provided that steadying influence on the back end, not providing a ton of offense, obviously, but just seems like, you know, he's just fitting exactly how they had hoped in his role.
Yeah, exactly how they had hoped. And the Blues, I think, were one of the first teams to try to get him after Minnesota bought him out. He went to Dallas because they gave him the extra year, I think a fourth year. And obviously Dallas bought him out. So they knew that the Blues were interested. So it was a kind of a quick thing once the Blues realized Torrey Krug was going to miss some time and they wanted to bring in Ryan Suter. I'm going to say that I think what Ryan Suter has done this year for the Blues, yes, he hasn't been given enough credit for what he's done for them. But I don't think Ryan Suter at this point, you know, is ever going to get any credit, right? Like,
right.
Nickel for every time I walked into an arena and he got booed. Like, I don't know how many teams he's played, but it's just every time he touches the puck, they boo him. So it is what it is at this point. But 40 years old, and when Nick Leddy went down in the fourth game of the season and Colton Parayko needed a partner to play 22 minutes a game, it was Ryan Suter. It just, yeah. So I'm going to turn 50 here in a week or two. I can't imagine, you know, 20 minutes at 40 years old. You know, it's crazy. But he's doing it, and he's looked good, and he's just playing his part. So he's been really good for the St. Louis Blues situation.
And Jeremy, just sorry before Dave gets in here, 50 is the new 40. So
yeah, great. I'll take it.
Hey, Jeremy, we appreciate you providing us with your time and your insight on the St. Louis Blues, a potential first-round opponent of the Winnipeg Jets coming up in the playoffs. So we'll potentially
we might be going out for a few drinks with Jeremy if he's in town.
Yeah, I can't wait. Funny you say that because I get a text once a day from Mike Russo, and he goes, "If you're even going to Vegas, this is not going to be fair." He's giving me trouble. So we'll see how that shakes out with the Winnipeg, St. Louis, and you know, Vegas and Minnesota, and how that all works out.
All right, Jeremy. Well, thanks very much for joining us. We appreciate it this morning on the Elite Hockey Show.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Cheers, Jeremy.
There he goes, Jeremy Rutherford. He is the athletic writer for the St. Louis Blues. Nobody more tied into the Jets opponent, a potential first round opponent, than Jeremy Rutherford.
Well, I kind of like the idea, Dave, of the Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press, our good friend, obviously, Dave, put it out there that, the Jets could go on a bit of a rivalry run.
A revenge tour.
A revenge run.
Yes.
That's what I meant to say. I got the wrong R word, Dave.
Oh, good.
But if they were able to play St. Louis in the first round, obviously, who they lost to in 2019, then they were able to play Colorado in the second round, who they lost to last year, obviously, and then Vegas, who they lost to in the conference finals in 2018.
And last year. And 2 years ago, sorry.
And 2 years ago, you're right. So, I mean, there could be a certain revenge element in this year's playoffs for the Jets, which I think is just going to give them extra fire. Not that they necessarily need it, because I think they're motivated by last year's first round exit, Dave. But sign me up if it's a Jets Blues first round matchup. Sign me up, because I think it wouldn't be an easy out for the Jets. That's for sure.
No, I don't think so, but I think it'd be a lot of fun. And I think any of the opponents, as we talked about in at the 10 o'clock time slot, Ezzy, I think that any of these first round opponents, look, playoffs are a different animal. I mean, we've been watching this team all year. We're through 73 games, game 74 coming up tomorrow, of course. Join the three of us. I believe it's the three of us. Maybe it's the two of us. I don't know. I'll be on it. I know I'll be on it. As
we still don't know where Drew is right now. He's parts unknown, so it's hard to know if, is he going to be on a balcony? I was watching. It's funny. I was at a local watering hole last night, and I was watching you guys on the post-game show while I was going to the bathroom. I put it on. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to put on the post-game show, see how the boys are doing. It looked like Drew was in darkness in the wilderness there. So
it's kind of like when we did the draft show, and I think he was back home in Kentucky, and it got progressively darker and darker, and then he started hearing noises coming from the forest.
I do remember that was so good, because I was hoping that a bear was going to attack Drew. Unfortunately, it never happened, Dave. But no, regardless if Drew's able to join us tomorrow, it should be another fun post-game show, because, as you know, the Canucks recently beat the Jets, and the Canucks are desperate for those 2 points, obviously, because now they've fallen, 4 points back of the Blues, I believe, with a game in hand, right? So there's a good battle going on in that Western Conference between the Wild, Blues, Canucks, Flames, and I guess we're not really counting Utah anymore, but certainly it's going to be a sprint to the finish in that playoff race.
Well, as we're not going to do a full one of these, or maybe we will.
Put on your antlers. It's time for the Minuk Moose Minute on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Hey, there I am. Anyways, the Manitoba Moose were in action against the Rockford Ice Hogs last night, and I know the Jets hogged all the attention, and I was not able to watch the game because, of course, there were only two of us, so I had to really make sure I was focused on what was happening so I could do the post-game show. But of course, after the post-game show, I started watching the Moose game and catching up. And the Moose the Moose are in tough. They're 13 points back of this Rockford team with going into last night's action, 10 games to go. So, a chance at the playoffs, not very likely, but there's, in Dumb and Dumber. So you're telling me there's a chance. There's a very minute chance that this Jets team could still, as he make a run. Sorry, the Moose, I should say, could make a run. But they needed clean wins in Rockford, and they need a sweep. And that they haven't swept the team since Grand Rapids in mid-January. So it's been a few months since they've been able to do that. They had to start with a win yesterday. They gave up the first goal of the game. But then Dylan Coughlin scored his 10th goal in 28 games for the Manitoba Moose.
He's quietly having a great season for the Moose.
It's unbelievable. I mean, how is it possible that he has 10 goals in 28 games? Well, he's scored 10 times. That's how it's possible as. But the fact of the matter is 10 goals in 28 games. So he ties the game for the Moose about 5 minutes after they gave up the opening goal of the game. And then in the second period, Danny Zhilkin, I know Frosty's going to be happy that I'm mentioning Danny Zhilkin, the 2022 third rounder, who of course was dealing with a lower body injury earlier in the season. He had his third goal in the last 10 games. Just a rocket on the power play, passed from Brad Lambert and Elias Salamonson. So a trio of Jets draft picks, the 2022 third rounder scores on a pass from the 2022 second rounder and the 2022 first rounder. So lots of draft. And actually, if you really want to go, CJ Cease, the 2014 fifth rounder, who was CJ Franklin when the Jets drafted him, but CJ Cease now, he was standing in front providing the screen. So technically 4 Jets prospects. Well, I don't think Cease is considered a prospect anymore, but 4 guys who were once Jets draft picks who were all instrumental in that. Moose, hold on for the win. Chris Dreger, the Winnipegger, gets his first win wearing antlers. So critical win. They're back in action tonight. 7 p.m. is puck drop. Daniel Fink will have the call for Moose hockey. And as OHL, WHL playoffs are in full swing right now. And the player that we have to mention, and I should say NCAA, the men's championship, of course, the Frozen Four. That's also the Zach Naring, the 2023 third rounder. He's in action with Western Michigan. So there's lots of things going on, and we've got it all detailed in the notes in the morning papers. So there's, but I will mention, Ezzy, Colby Barlow, game 1 for Oshawa, 3 goals, 1 assist, named for star of the game.
Not bad.
Not too shabby, Colby Barlow. So, he definitely had a down season, and then the regular season but the things that matter, the things that remember are championships. So what do they say? Banners fly forever. So we'll see if he and his Oshawa Generals team can win in the OHL. They're going to have to go up against Jacob Julian, the Jets 5th rounder, and that powerhouse London Knights team if they want to eventually dethrone them. But lots of excitement with the prospects. Anyways, as some final thoughts from you on the Saturday morning, we're going to wrap it up. We're a little over time. So what's your final thought? And then Jets are practicing in an hour, and then we'll have that on illegalcurve.com. And then, of course, join us tomorrow, throughout the day on illegalcurve.com, and then after the game on the Illegal Curve postgame show, following the conclusion of Jets Canucks around 4:40 p.m.
Right. As you mentioned, Dave, the Jets are going to be on the ice in the next hour, and I don't think we're expecting anything groundbreaking, right? I think it's business as usual. We know who's going to be at practice and who isn't going to be practice. Maybe there's going to be a little bit more information provided on Rasmus Kupari, Dave. I'm not holding my breath. As you mentioned on illegalcurve.com, right? It could be something to do with the concussion that he recently suffered, right? But obviously David Gustafson filled in very nicely last night, popping in a G, right? So
yep.
You had the Gus Bus GIF going on X, Dave, which I always always makes me laugh. Because we've obviously been big fans of Gus Bus. It's been a bit of a tough year for him with the being a healthy scratch and everything like that. But I think you'd agree that he's been a good team player and a company man. And when he's been called upon, he's provided the Jets with good minutes. But great show today, and just continuing to be impressed by this Jets team that keeps winning. And at least for the time being, they've got the first place in the league wrapped up. Obviously, we're expecting it to go back and forth a little bit between the Jets and Capitals, with the Capitals having an extra game in hand. But just looking forward to another game tomorrow afternoon. And really, Dave, as I mentioned kind of earlier in the show, really starting to get excited at the thought of the playoffs. I mean, the nice thing is we're getting to watch some great playoff races in both conferences. But I think it's all about gearing up for the playoffs, not just for the Jets, but for us too. We're going to be doing shows at Boston Pizza and City Place, right, Dave? So we're gearing up for the playoffs just as much as the boys on the ice are.
Well, and a big shout out to Vicious and Brendan Matheson. I don't want to leave those guys out. We appreciate their comments. We appreciate everyone's comments, but of course, when they make those donations, we got to mention that we appreciate.
Yep. The human fund can always use a few extra shekels, Dave.
Exactly. But again, good points. Looking at Brendan's comments, we'll see what happens, but you are right, Brendan. It will, just the fact that these guys have had to kind of amend the way things are. You knew that you're never going to get through an 82 game season and have the line stay consistent. So having to have some flexibility is not a bad thing. We have plenty of flexibility, but our show must come to an end at some point, so it's going to come to an end right now. We'll thank all of you for joining us here spending your Saturday morning, I should say, with us here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
But sorry, Dave, I know you're going to get into our sponsor reads here, but wanted to give a shout out. I forgot his name. I apologize, but he was serving me an Italian margarita at the Jets game last night. The bartender at Canada Life Center, I was wearing my Illegal Curve hoodie, the new hoodies that we got, and my toque. So obviously I was clearly identified as one of the handsome members of Illegal Curve. And he made a shout out and he said he loved the show as he was making me an Italian margarita. So I apologize that I forgot his name. I want to say it was started with a C, maybe Cameron. it could have been something else. Obviously, there's lots of other different names that I could have forgotten, Dave. Anyways, nice kid. And not only is he a good fan of IC, which was, I told him was a nice ego boost. No, I'm kidding. But he made me a delicious Italian margarita, which I thoroughly enjoyed while watching last night's game. So shout out to that bartender from last night's game.
All right. Well, that's okay. As I don't know if you heard on the post-game show, I also gave a shout out to someone who's a fan of the show. I remembered their name, though, as unlike you. I remember names. I made a point of making sure that I would remember their names so I could give them a shout out. But hey, I'm sure maybe as he requested anonymity and didn't want the notoriety that comes along with mentioning on this program.
Well, it's funny too, because I was with my sister last night at the game, and as we were walking to our seats, we were in 212, and I've never actually sat in that section behind. We were behind Jake Allen, and boy, was he getting that Bronx cheer earlier in the game when he let in those 2 goals.
Yeah.
So I kind of wasn't around that area, but somebody yelled at me from behind as I was just walking into our section, and I didn't recognize him either. So another shout out to that gentleman who screamed at me because he wasn't familiar to me. He could have been a regular.
It was definitely Spency.
Yeah, it was definitely not Spency. If it was Spency, I would have slow motion ran to him and embraced him. That's what Spency and I do. Whenever we see each other, we have to embrace.
You do realize when what you call slow motion is actually just your regular speed?
That's true. That's correct.
Okay, well, let's end it there. We're having a lot of fun. We appreciate everyone joining us on their Saturday morning, spending your Saturday with us here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Of course, like I said, the Illegal Curve postgame show coming your way tomorrow after Jets and Canucks. Jets will be wrapping up their 4-game homestand. But like I always tell you, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you are subscribing to this channel. And like I said, if you can, because I notice we get quite a few likes when I post the Scott Arneal media availability or the players' media availabilities. But make sure you're liking those videos as well. Those help us get them, spread the word. And of course, like I said, if you see our stuff on Facebook, share it. Let other people know. Come to Illegal Curve. It's pretty much your number one source for Jets Moose news anywhere in this province. So
we're kind of a big deal. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Ezra Ginsburg, kind of a big deal. Anyways, big thank you to all of you for joining us and all the sponsors of Illegal Curve who make the post-game show, the Saturday show, and the website illegalcurve.com a possibility. They are in no particular order: Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Play Now, Holt Dental, Boston Pizza, City Place, and Seagram's. Support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. That's it for today's show. I'm Dave Minuk. He's Ezzy Ginsburg. Lots of love to everyone. We'll see you guys on Sunday.